afternoon. Welcome to this esteemed event honoring Holyoke's finest, Esther and Eddie Sachs. And I know 98% of you have some good Eddie Sachs stories, but we don't have time. Okay. I have to mention a few people, and the first one is Deborah Leopold is the co-donor of the gifts and the keeper of David Sachs now. I understand that Judge Robert Murphy is on the Zoom, retired Judge Collins, Judge Content, the esteemed Judge Graney, Judge Edward Ginsburg, the former First Justice in the Holyoke Court, Bill McDonough, and Jeremy Stalin. Somewhere else there is former Congressman Michael Harrington, who I've heard many stories from David Sachs about but never met, Senator John Vilas, who I've met many times, former Rep Aaron Vega, and former Rep Mike Kane, who we should have gotten haircuts together today, but I don't know what my problem was. So anyway, that's when I'm here. And this is an event to remind us of two very special people. My connection was that when my parents moved to Holyoke, they lived on the corner of Linden and Essex, right next to the Saxes, I believe, same apartment. And technically I was at David's bar mitzvah, but I was probably only a month in my mother. So it was very great. So I guess your turn, my turn. Eileen, go ahead, Eileen.
I'll put it up for you.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I'm Eileen Crosby. I'm the archivist at the Holyoke History Room. And I really want to thank first Deborah Leopold and David Sachs for their decision to donate this wonderful collection to the Holyoke History Room. And David especially for the work he and others have put in over the last couple of years, creating accurate descriptions for these images. And that work is ongoing. I'll say a little more about that. As I've worked with the collection and David over the past 2 to 3 years, I've come to realize what a treasured collection this is for this family. It's a family archive that has been on full display for more than a generation in their offices, and most recently in David's office. They're news photographs, but they're also treasured family memories. So it was a very big step for them to decide to give it to the history room to care for. And in doing so, they are really preserving a slice of Holyoke's most vulnerable history. And we think of when we think of a fragile historical item, you might think of an old 19th century map that's kind of crumbling at the edges, or you think of a faded photograph, again, from 1900 or so. But I think, working in the history room for 10 years, I think of the most vulnerable history as being the recent history. And that's because, first of all, people say, well, what's historic? Are my snapshots historic? Well, no, maybe not. So they just sit around someplace in a shoebox or on a closet shelf. And then we know what happens to them, right? When someone passes on, there is so much out there that people still have from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and that is completely underdocumented in our cultural heritage institutions, and that's nationwide. So something to think about. Of course, a lot of us want to keep our photographs, right? So there's something to consider. Where should these be in the long term, and what do they say about Holyoke's history? And another reason is that what historians and anyone interested in history in the past wants to know has also changed. There was a time when historic figures were all white men who had prominent positions in the professions, in politics, in business, and we actually have a lot of information on a lot of those men from Holyoke's 19th century, early 20th century history. I'm not sure we have pictures of them. We have a lot. What people are interested in now is social history. They're interested in working people. They're interested in all the roles that women had, whether they worked outside the home or didn't work outside the home because they were discouraged from doing so. We're interested in how people lived and about social life and social circles and about health and schooling and recreation. And so, yes, those snapshots you might have of your family in the 1940s or 50s might actually be valuable for that kind of history. This collection offers a window onto the worlds of Edward and Esther Sachs. It was a lively place, as I hope this little slideshow I put together will show. And it's only part of Holyoke's history. It's not the whole story. But what's wonderful about this donation, because these were collected and treasured and documented, and because all of you were here, there are people here today, either in the room or on Zoom, who can tell us more of the story behind each picture. And that is also what I'm immensely grateful for. The collection is being processed through the hard work of 2 History Room volunteers, Tom Cass, who is here today, and Betty Dano, and myself. And we're making digital preservation copies and a detailed index. Because many of these are news photographs, they'll have copyright restrictions, and so we won't be able to share some of them online, but they'll be available at the History Room for research use. And the index will be online for sure. And as we clear copyright with certain images, we'll probably be able to share those as well.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm David Sachs.
And I'm Deborah Leopold, and we want to thank you all for coming.
And we want to start, hopefully you can see that. That's how the auctions used to start.
Peter.
And Deb's going to have a seat.
That's how the auction started. Do you want to listen to it?
No.
Okay, so hello to everybody, including family and close friends that I know are tuned in LA, Denver, Chicago, DC, Florida, and Pretoria, South Africa. Deborah Leopold, who you just met, my wife of a mere 37 years and 3 days, happy anniversary again. She and I are delighted to have been able to make this donation to the library. And Deb and I extend our thanks to Attorney Toby Wilson, not only for being MC, but for making the original connection with the library and with Eileen Crosby. And it's been a pleasure working with historian Eileen Crosby, and I thank you and IT guru Carlos Vincente and your volunteers, one of whom is here, Tom. And thanks also to Morris Ferreter and Buddy Resnick for your help in the identification process on the photos, and to former state rep Mike Kane, who 10 years ago, when he was visiting my office in Springfield, first gave me the idea to do something collection. Let me add a little bit of color to how this came to be, mention a few of the scenes, and then we'll hear, after I finish, from Morris Ferreter and any of the others of you on Zoom who have questions or comments, how this came to be. My mother collected the pictures primarily from the Transcript Telegram, the TT, but also at times from the Union and the Daily News. And they were hung in my parents' 2 offices, as Eileen noted on the website and in her remarks. When my dad decided to prematurely close his office, after all, he was merely in his 80s, I offered to take the photos and hang them up in the lobby in Springfield. That generated a sharp Eddie Sachs, throw that thing away. Fortunately for the library, I interpreted his response as an unclear directive. Esther Laura Kramer Sachs, my mother was, in her own quiet way, a force of nature. She never went to college, but was fluent in multiple languages, outstanding at managing finances, active in the community, and a pianist extraordinaire. She was an insurance broker and auctioneer, was active in local Jewish organizations, from newspaper editor to piano player and everything in between. She was president of the Holyoke Family Service Society across the street on Maple Street from the library, which rated multiple photographs in the collection. She was a Model City Advisory Board member and was on the Belchertown State School Board of Trustees. On the history room door upstairs, there is a bronze plaque. Here's a picture of it, which hopefully, then maybe you can't see it right there with the slideshow going. But anyway, it shows my parents together in the city council chamber at City Hall doing an auction. And Esther also did a lot of auctions by herself over the years. Then there was Eddie Sachs. There's a classic photo of him, which Eileen had posted on the website with attorneys John Gorman McLean and Bill Stapleton. More to the point though, the picture includes his ever-present cigar, which can be seen, if not any longer smelled, throughout the whole collection and with his many hats, which included deputy sheriff, constable, auctioneer, real estate broker. There's the annual police bicycle auction, which shows my cousin Howie Wayne, who also shows up as ball boy and me as mascot in pictures for the Warrior softball team. Team manager Eddie is seen with Esther's Hillman Minks car parked by the Diamond with such players as Meyer Feldman, George Scully, Abe Bussell, team captain Harry Schwartzwald, and a then very young but future judge Jack Moriarty. The 1948 Holyoke Notre Dame Club train trip to South Bend, Indiana is captured. My dad told me that the club consisted of 49 Catholics and 1 Jew. There's a picture of Eddie with Congressman Eddie Boland and tax collector William Lunny. Court officer Bill Lunny Jr. and I would often stand in my lobby looking at this photo as we smiled at the memory of our dads together. Eddie was a confidant of mayors, Henry Teffert, Edwin Seibel, Sam Resnick, from whose law office humidor I was sent many times by my father to appropriate cigars, Bill Topier and Bill Hamilton. One-time acting mayor and district court clerk Gregory J. Scanlon, from whom my middle name comes, and he and his wife Margaret were dear friends of my parents. They can all be seen together in an old Holyoke District Court party photo at Gleason's townhouse. Eddie was nothing if not loyal, and he was a loyalist to the end on behalf of High Sheriff David Manning. He even painted his Ford Fairlane with re-elect Manning on it. There are photos of that car and another one of his cars where he was driving Sheriff Manning in the St. Patrick's Day Parade with 2 young passengers. One was the sheriff's grandson, DJ Manning, and someone named David Gregory sitting with him. Years later, he's pictured with High Sheriff Michael Ash, who, as his first official act, rehired Eddie as a deputy, and later can be seen honoring him up at the Loomis House as the longest serving deputy in the Commonwealth. There are election night in the transcript newsroom photos, which include images of publisher Bill DeWhite, editor Dick Murphy, attorneys Hugh Corcoran and John S. Begley, and even one of the young me tabulating results on a now ancient adding machine. There's one with House Speaker Dave Bartley at his Elmwood headquarters. There's one together with the brothers Sachs, Eddie and Ralph, and other photos of each of them donating blood, and my grandmother Kramer as a volunteer. Hollywood's Dorothy Lamour is pictured with Eddie. There's Eddie with Rocky Marciano at the Valley Arena. The caption on that one quotes Eddie saying he was glad he did not have to serve a writ on the former champ. There's outside the log cabin, my parents with Holyoke Bar Association President Charlie Lavelle, who that night welcomed my father as the group's first non-lawyer member. There are judges, politicians, religious leaders, business people, and everyday citizens and residents pictured who had the good fortune to be in the company of Esther and Eddie as they went about their many community roles. I think of other luminaries that I've seen in the pictures, such as West Oil founder Jake Borowski, Tom Epstein, Abe Saltman, and judge and attorney and softball team veteran George Beauregard, who I know is zooming in today. There's even one of Eddie serving a writ on a horse. I sort of think maybe it was a horse he had already bet on. Then there are governors. Governor Endicott Peabody with my mother and myself at the State House. Governor Mike Dukakis swearing me in at Heritage State Park, and another one of him with Eddie at a Holyoke Community College event. Then there's the one of Court Officer Sachs robing new Judge Sachs on his first day. I show up as Holyoke School Committee Chair with Superintendent Jimmy Kelly, Special Ed Director Dr. Jim McDonald, and Dr. Ann Bird Schumer of the State Department of Ed signing an important special ed agreement. Not shown in that picture, but was there on the side, is then Superintendent Gigi Counter, who played such a major behind the scenes role. So I will thank you all for being here today and for listening. I'm going to call on Morris Ferreter to make a few observations, and then anyone that is on the Zoom that has questions or comments, be happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate the fact that you asked me to say a few words, because certainly Eddie was somebody that you could make a lot of comments about. I have to say that his impression, as far as I was concerned, the first impression I had of Eddie is something that carried with me through all of the years. And it started off with the really characteristics of the man. I mean, here was a guy with tremendous humor who had a lot of knowledge, a lot of expectations for the future. He was a person, really a man for all seasons. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. And I have to tell you that my first experience with Eddie was at one time I was attending an auction down at the Springdale Park, and the auction was of furniture. And so I was listening to Eddie, and Eddie was making a presentation that there was in that room a young lawyer who had just passed the bar, and he was showing compassion for this young lawyer, saying he needs some furniture. So I'm going to set a fair price, and I want to tell you right now, I don't really want to hear any other items being auctioned. This is going to be that young lawyer's desk. And I have to say, that was in 1957. And to this day, I still have that desk. So it was a wonderful first experience with Eddie. And there were so many others, because he, as you said, he wore a number of hats. He was not only a deputy sheriff, he was not only a constable, he was a coach, he was a man for all seasons, as I say. And in looking back at some of the things he did, he was able to have his humor, compassion, and knowledge and common sense explained so many times, because he would utilize those in doing everything he did, including serving writs and serving criminal defendants. And he always did it with such humor and such panache that he was able to do it, and the person receiving the summons would think he won the lottery. I mean, that was the kind of guy he was. He just did those things. You talked about his being a coach, and he coached, to my knowledge, and I saw some of the films there that were probably before my time, and I've had a lot of time, I have to tell you that. But he, when he was out in that field, and whoever we were playing, I think they were aware of the fact that we were going to win, because Eddie made certain that he was doing that kind of a job. And in addition to that, there are other instances of his knowledge and his ability to show common sense, and his humor in auctioning, which was another one of his specialties. And a friend indicated that at one time he was bidding on a house, And apparently the price wasn't great enough for Eddie. So Eddie said, I have to tell you, he said, you're not even bidding enough to buy the garage. So he had that kind of expectations of everybody. And I think as far as my comments are concerned, I'm sure there are others waiting at home to make their comments, but I just want to say congratulations to you for having the ability to donate these items to the library. And I'm sure that the future generations will look back at this and see what Holyoke in those days was really like. Thanks for the opportunity.
MC Toby Wilson has just deferred to me. So if I need a little help from Carlos with folks that are on the Zoom.
The one thing that I haven't heard anybody mention is Eddie's particular skill in handicapping horses. Maybe because it didn't happen in Holyoke, I don't know, but.
And I don't know if you were on when I mentioned that there was a picture of him with a writ and a horse.
Oh, yes, and I saw the picture, like, perfect, it was perfect.
Thanks, Judy.
I remember
Uh,
going through my training as a new judge and ending up in Springfield with Judge Smith and our star here for today. I will never forget the joie de vivre, the sense of joy, the sense of living that Ed Sachs brought to life. It was a pleasure to have met him, and although it was only for 4 days, I'll never forget him. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Ginsburg. Thank you for being here. Looks like June Brown.
Yes, hi, David. I just want to say something. Can you hear me?
We can.
I'm so honored to be asked to join this. I just want you to know I have only one thing to say. Your father was quite a man, but like father, like son. You're just like him, David. Thank you for asking me.
David, can you hear me?
No.
Now I can hear you just fine. Good afternoon.
I just want to say that when I first started as a judge, Eddie would come in and say to me in the lobby, "You don't want to do that." And he was invariably right. And I also think he had something to do with me becoming a judge because of his friendship with Mike Dukakis, who of course appointed me to about 5 judgeships after it started. He and his wife were wonderful people.
And I remember back in the 60s, or early 70s, somewhere in there, being the first time I met you was at a sheriff's clam bake. And you were telling about Holy Cross and NYU Law School. And I think we were the only 2 not playing cards that day. And then I know you did dozens and dozens of foreclosure auctions with them when you were at Ely King. So good memories of that. Thank you.
True.
All right, we also have a comment from Mary Levin, who says, "What a lovely and lasting history from a very special family. Thank you for sharing with us all."
Thank you, Mary Rose.
You're very welcome.
There you are.
Here I am, and
Yeah, jumped out of the chat.
and I'm on Cape Cod on a beautiful sunny day. So you didn't mention Cape Cod in your list of places where people are.
It's within Massachusetts. You're welcome.
Oh. Okay, anyway, thank you all. Thank you so much. This is unbelievably beautiful. My father grew up in Holyoke, so I even saw Ely Street where he and his family lived, Ely Court. And I remember going there as a child. So this is so meaningful for me too. Thanks.
Thanks. Hi to Paul.
Okay, he's out. He's out and about. Thank you.
All right. I was going to say, if there are no other takers, I'm going to thank.
There's one more.
There's one more.
There we go.
My name is John Nixon, and I was a classmate of David's at Cushing Academy. And I know where all the bodies are buried. No, but seriously, Dave and I have maintained our friendship through the years. And I always want to come up and visit him in Holyoke. And so I'm going to put that on my bucket list, and I hope to get up there, and hopefully I'll get to meet some of his friends.
Yeah.
He was a great student at Cushing, and we just were friends, and we just kept in touch, and I've enjoyed knowing him and his lovely wife. And unfortunately, I didn't get to meet his parents, but it's been a pleasure knowing him through these years, and I know he's provided great leadership in the community, because that's the kind of person he is.
John,
And I'm honored to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. And I should let everyone else know that when we were at Cushing, you educated me a lot about what was going on in the Deep South, and your dad, who was a dentist, was president of the NAACP in Birmingham, Alabama, and in the state. And I learned so much about civil rights from you. And then we had a long gap for no particular reason until, I guess it was 2014, Deb and I decided to do a road trip on civil rights in the South. And I went searching online, found your name, called and said, "Is this the John Nixon from Cushing?" And we went down, and you gave us that great tour of Birmingham and Montgomery, and we've stayed in much closer touch since then. So thank you for being such a good friend as well.
Thank you for inviting me
We'll
today.
see you soon. Okay,
Okay.
stay in touch. Judge Collins,
Hey, David.
there you go.
May I just join everybody in thanking you so very much, you and Deb, for your generosity to the library and to the community. I think Holyoke is a very, very special place. It's where I think generations of folks have come to be able to achieve the American dream. Your dad did so much to help folks do that. You've done that with your work in the court and your public service. My first job out of UMass, when I graduated back in '68, was working in the Upward Bound program at Holyoke High and Holyoke Catholic. And there I began to meet wonderful, beautiful people and from Holyoke. And I'd just like to thank you for your, like the McHughes, John and Annie McHugh, the Bartleys, and so many folks. And then it was David Bartley who brought me as a freshman in the legislature to begin to teach me about politics and the practice of politics. I want to thank you for your gifts, because I think it's going to help so many folks when they come to the library, future generations, to see what the promise of this country can be. And your generosity and Deb's generosity, I think, will help make many beautiful lives. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. Well said. Appreciate it. I will again start to say thank you to all of you for being here today, and it's really appreciated that you took the time, and those of you who just made such really touching comments, thank you so much for that. Deb and I really appreciate it, and thanks again to Morris and Eileen and Toby and volunteer Tom Cass and our good friend and neighbor of Morris, Ellen Dunnew, for being here. And I think we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.